before we go live.
Okay, right. Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the local review body of the 27th of January 2021. I can confirm that the meeting has been properly called and is quorate. Firstly, can I ask members to appoint a chair for the meeting?
Could I nominate Councillor McKee?
Second that. They're so kind, these gentlemen, aren't they? Okay, okay, I'll take it on. Have we any apologies, Claire?
No, Chair. 5 members present. No apologies.
Okay, thank you. Any declarations of interest, folks?
Nope.
No. I've just, it's not a declaration of interest, but I got an email from the applicant for item 4. But I just responded to him saying that I couldn't correspond with him because I was on the committee, and I sent that back to him and I deleted his email. So I've got no interests to declare other than that. Anybody else? No. Okay. Can we move to item 4, Claire? Field to rear of Mill Pond, Nether Mill, Park Gate. Dumfries, refusal of planning permission in principle for erection of dwelling house and installation of septic tank and soakaway. Reference number 20/0717/PIP. I don't know if some of you remember before when I took planning committee papers, I got pages itemised into groups. And if I take them a group at a time, it makes it a wee bit easier, I think, for everybody. And if I'll give you the group and the page numbers, and if you've any items within those page numbers, just raise them at that time. Does that seem okay to you? I'll tell you, we'll try it on the first item and we'll take it from there. Okay, Claire, we're with you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take you through the papers as usual. Just briefly through the notes here. You've got the usual papers in your papers under this item: the notice of review, report and handling, observations of the appointed officer, planning application form, the decision notice, and relevant extracts from the LDP2, photos of the application site and locality. The grounds of refusal in this case are the application site is located such that it would fail to allow the erection of a dwelling house which would conform with or enhance the established character and layout of the Nether Mill small building group, and therefore any dwelling house would be unsympathetic to local built forms and have a negative impact on the sense of place and local distinctiveness, contrary to Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, policies OP2 and policy H3 and associated supplementary guidance. And 2, that a private filled drainage system is proposed within a public sewered area and no evidence has been submitted from Scottish Water to confirm that a connection to the public sewer is not possible, contrary to the requirements of the Dumfries and Galloway LTP2 policy IN9. The requested method of determination on page 18, that this be on assessment of the review documents only with no further procedure or by means of an inspection of the land which is subject to review. You have the grounds stated in the notice of review. In summary, the applicant has introduced a range of animals and birds to the land. The applicants currently live in temporary circumstances within Nether Mill, which allows the applicants to look after them. They would like to be on site to care for, nurture and protect their wildlife. The proposed dwelling house would replace an ageing shed on the site and would enhance the character and layout of the property. It would be energy efficient. It would have a layout to suit the local area and environment. The applicants have a great deal of support from the local community. The relevant development plan policies are in your papers from pages 87 to 93, being OP1, OP2, H3, NE8, IN7, IN9, and you've got different supplementary guidance there too. The other material considerations are Scottish Planning Policy, SPP, June 2004. So the main issues for the LRB to consider are: does the proposal comply with the terms of the Development Plan in Principle? In particular, does the proposal meet the terms of LDP2 Policy H3 in Principle? Does the proposal accord with the guidance set in the adopted LPD2 supplementary guidance relating to housing in the countryside in Principle? Specifically, does the location of the application site allow for the erection of a dwelling house which would conform with or enhance the established character and layout of the Nethermill Small Business Group? Would such a dwelling house be unsympathetic to the local built form and have a negative impact on the sense of place and local distinctiveness? Is it agreed that the proposal would be contrary to the term of IN 9 of LPP2? And if it is not considered that the proposal accords with the terms of the development plan, are there any set of material considerations of sufficient weight to justify a departure from the terms of the development? If so, what reasons would members give for a decision if it was considered that the proposal departs from the terms of the development plan? So, having outlined the documents within your papers, it falls to the LRB to determine if it has sufficient information to consider the review. It's confirmed that there will be no representations from any party heard today. You have the following options. You can decide you have sufficient information for you to determine the review today. Request further information in the form of written representations. The LRB would be required to state precisely the information it was seeking and who would provide it. Resolve to hold a hearing, again specifying who would be invited to speak and on what matters. Resolve to hold a site visit, accompanied or unaccompanied, which can be done in conjunction with any of the above, but would not allow a decision to be made today. And if the local review body resolves that you have sufficient information and that no further procedure is required, you have full powers to uphold, reverse or vary a determination. The decision notice will include a statement of the terms in which the planning authority has decided the case reviewed. There's a planning advisor present here at the meeting. He's here to assist for this item only. That the following items on the agenda will be a different planning advisor. It is confirmed that they have not had any involvement in this case and were not the case officer or the appointed officer for this application. They are purely here to provide independent advice as needed on matters of planning, policy, law or process to the LRB. So if members are clear, no further clarification is required. I'll ask the Chair now to lead the debate. In the first instance, to lead the LRB through the agenda papers together to decide if you have sufficient information before making a determination today.
Right, thanks very much, Claire. So Lara and David are here to give advice if you have any questions. They don't address the committee at the present moment, is that right?
No, yes, we've got David here as your independent planning advisor, and Larry's here to assist with the slides.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we'll go to agenda item 4. Please notice of review, refusal of planning permission in principle for erection of dwelling house, installation of septic tank and soakaway, a field to rear a mill pond, Nether Mill Park Gate, Dumfries, planning reference 20/0717/BIP. Okay, do you want to take us through the papers first? Well, I'll tell you what, we'll go through the papers and we'll take it from there and see how we react to what I'm doing. Agenda item 4, pages 9 to 13. If you have any issues you want to raise in those papers. Notice of review, pages 13 to 22. Notice of review dated 6th October 2020, submitted by Plan B agent on behalf of Mr. T. McGuinness, applicant, received on the same day. Anybody any issues either?
Just clarification, because I couldn't see it. There's no agricultural need anywhere else or within their reason for review, is there?
I don't think agricultural need was mentioned. David or Lara? David.
Morning, Chair. Morning, members.
Morning.
No essential agricultural need has been claimed or assessed in this case.
Okay, Ivor? Thank you.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. No, nobody else? No, right. Okay, item section 2, report on handling, pages 23 to 48. Anybody, any issues? No. Section 3, pages 49 to 55, observation of appointed officer on the applicant's agents, notice of review and further comments from an interested third party. Pages 49 to 55. Anybody? Okay, section 4, planning application form submitted on 27th of May 2020, associated plans and supporting information, 57 to 75. No issues. Section 5, decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated 21st of August 2020, pages 77 to 83. No issues. Section 6, 85 to 93, relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2. No issues. Right, the section 7, photos of application site and the locality, 95 to 99. Okay, now do you consider that you've got enough information in these papers to make a decision?
I think enough information.
Thank you. Jeffrey, thank you. Anybody want to raise any issues in a discussion on these papers? Or do you just want to go ahead and make a decision? Okay, are you willing to go with, Ivor again?
Chair, when you take a look at the reasons for refusal, I think the reasons are quite sound there. I noticed that there's a slight difference between the report and the actual decision letter, where there was 4 reasons for refusal, I think, and 2 on the decision letter. There is no agricultural need for this, so it's never been demonstrated or asked for. I think that's makes it's into the actual small buildings group one, and the pattern at Nethermill is that there's no backland development anywhere. Everything's frontage onto the road. So I think the officers in this case have given this a fair hearing, and in accordance with our policy, I would move that we refuse as per the papers.
Thank you, Ivor. Gail?
Thank you, Chair. I don't disagree with anything Ivor said, but it might be useful if I could see the photos on the slideshow, because mine are very, very dark in my papers, and it's not giving me a clear indication, if that's okay.
Lara, could you bring the pictures up? Oh, no, it's still a picture of David Sucky I want.
Sorry, David.
Nobody wants that, but yes, I'll run you through the photos, Chair.
Yeah.
So, Lara, if you can progress them, please. The first one, I think, is the critical one, and this is the issue that Councillor Hislop was just raising. And I think the aerial photo here shows just how Nethermill has a very, very distinct pattern, where without exception, all the houses have a road frontage. And you can see underlined and outlined in red is the application site, which is set some 80 to 90 metres from the road frontage. So the second slide is...
Can I take it, David, the blue line is the actual full site?
Yes, right. Just for clarity, the red line is the application site boundaries. So that's what's actually been applied for, and therefore that's the only section which is before yourselves today. However, the blue line is the land which is also in the ownership of the applicant. So that just shows you the overall land holding, which is referred to as a small holding here.
That's fine, thank you.
And the next three slides, I'd have to say that these are on pages 97 to 99 of your agenda papers. For some reason, unfortunately, the slides I've been given, I've noticed, don't include the two photos that are on page 99, but there's nothing really in those which are as critical as I think that first slide. But the second slide gives you an overall view of just looking down from a drone photo that was provided by the applicant, which shows the context of the site from above. And you can see there's been a relatively recent agricultural building, and then the one which is in white and outlined in red is the one which is actually before the members today. And the next slide, similarly, just from panning round from another angle, again taken by the applicant's drone in July, looks down onto the site. You can see the ponds which are relevant. The next one gives you a view of the actual agricultural building, which is proposed to be demolished. And you can see the newer building just beyond that. But it's certainly, I think from the photos, it's clear it's not an agricultural building which is causing an eyesore by any stretch of the imagination. It's not fallen into disrepair. So apologies, there aren't the two slides that are on page 99, but they similarly just pan round and show the same sort of thing. And the sixth photo in your papers just shows what the site was like in December 2019, prior to the erection of the new agricultural building. Thanks,
right, thank you very much. Anybody any questions?
No, that's very helpful, Chair. Thank you.
Nice, good, clear pictures. These drones are what a difference they make. You're getting good photographs of the site, much better than everything taken for the ground. So we've had a mover and a seconder to agree with the officers that we dismiss this planning permission. Is anybody otherwise minded? No. No. Okay, thank you very much. So you've refused this planning permission principle for the erection of a dwelling house, installation of septic tank and soakaway at the field to the rear of Mill Pond, Nether Mill Park Gate. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Can we now move to item 5? Notice of refusal of planning permission for formation of 3 box dormer windows on northwest elevation and 1 box dormer on southeast elevation of dwelling house at Springbank, Cotton Street, Castle Douglas. Planning reference 20/1446/FUL. Okay, thank you. Right, can we go pass through the paper? Do you want to see the pictures first?
Well, I'm just sorry, sorry, Chair. I was just making sure that Robert Duncan was in the meeting. We've just changed over planning advisors.
Sorry about that.
Okay, okay.
We'll go to the photograph first, colleagues.
But do you want to run through the
response? Right, Lara, could you take us through the photographs, please, or Claire, whoever?
Morning, Chair. Morning, everyone. I had to make sure that I wasn't involved with the first item today, but I didn't act as appointed officer for these cases, so I'm acting as independent planning advisor. Happy to take you all through the photographs.
That'll be fine, Robert.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is a view. This is from Cotton Street in Castle Douglas. For those that know it, this is showing the front northwestern elevation of the dwelling house as existing. You'll see that existing chimneys, or the ones that were there previously, have been taken out of the roof space. Moving on to the next slide. This is the southeast elevation of the dwelling house as existing, and you'll note from the case officer's report and the decision notice, this is where the primary concerns lie with the design of the dormer windows. Next slide. Beyond this, sorry, I think there's one missing. Okay, we don't seem to have done before. This is a view of the existing rear roof slope from Church Street. So just to clarify, this is looking from Church Street. You'll see the Gemini cars building in the background of that on the other side of Cotton Street, so that you've got your bearings. So essentially, when you're looking at the southeast elevation, you're looking at the rear elevation of this house. So it's the mirror elevation of the one we saw in the first slide, and the proposed southeastern dormer window, the long box dormer window, would be on this elevation.
Okay, anybody any questions? Right, can we go through the papers now? Section 1, Notice of Review, 7th October 2020, submitted by Mr. Davis, agent, on behalf of Mr. T. Mitchell, applicant, and received the same day, pages 105 to 125. Anybody any issues on that section? Claire, you want in hand?
Yeah, just would you like taking through the notes quickly before you do that, or just for this item, like we did for the first one?
Okay, are you happy to go the way I'm doing it, or do you want to do it?
No, obviously, yes, Chair, very happy to go through section by section. Just the notes sort of highlight some issues that you might want to consider.
Okay, if you've got issues in that section, Claire, that'll be fine. If you just tell us the page you're on.
Right, I'll go to my notes then and go look at the grounds stated in the notice of review. And I'll just go through that just to be consistent with what went for the item before. So in summary, then you've got the proposed dormer of the southeast elevation would not be imposing to the terms of mass, scale and density than one or two dormers formed under permitted development rights, i.e. not needing planning permission, to the proposed dormer to the southeast elevation is set within 0.3 of a metre of the ridge, eaves and verges of the roof plan. The proposed dormer wall and window would be set back from the rear wall of the southeast elevation. Dormer is similar to that proposed in the southeast elevation, being granted planning permission elsewhere. Just checking through my notes, I think.
Just looking at the photographs we've got, have you got a copy of the photographs we've got, Robert? Because it shows the building that there's a dormer at the right hand side on the first picture, and the chimney pots are still there. No, around the front. We've got a longer picture than that, that's what it is. I take it that what's cut off there, I see there is a dormer right at the side. I take it that's next another house.
Yeah, yes, Chair. What you're looking at there, if it's the picture with the Peugeot in the foreground, on the left-hand side you've got the application site, and that is before the two chimney stacks were removed on the far side. So that element of the building is in white. The closer part of the building in beige as it turns around the corner is a separate dwelling house, yes.
Okay, thank you. And what's the theory behind the chimneys being taken away?
I think some people do it to try and improve insulation standards within their houses. They're seen as often sources of drafts or dampness, particularly if they're not used as chimneys. They can attract a lot of damp.
And so, and we've no indication of what they're intended to do with that space. They'll be built up.
No, it's something you can do. If it's not a listed building, it's something you can do without needing planning permission, because you're altering a dwelling house without increasing the floor space of it. So in a case like this where it's not listed, you can actually do that without needing planning permission. I think you would need a building warrant to do that, though.
Claire, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I should have also said that the applicant has also introduced new information which was not in front of the appointed officer when the application was determined. This new information comprised signed statements and third parties notified neighbours and others expressing general support for the proposal, and 2 drawings which the applicant's agent believes demonstrate what form of the development is possible at this property without the need for planning permission. The applicant was asked to provide an explanation as to why these have not been in front of the appointed officer when the determination was made. The applicant's agent has advised that he believes that these documents form an important part of the review process. So,
if they're late, should we be considering them?
Well, that's for you to determine. That's one of your issues to consider. Do you wish to take the late additional post-determination information submitted into account when assessing the review case? In so doing, members would need to be satisfied that there was sufficient reasoning as to why this information could not have been submitted when the application was determined by the appointed officer.
We haven't got that information in front of us. Jeff Lever. Jeffrey?
Page 169 shows diagrams of what's being proposed in terms of the dormers.
What page are you on, Jeffrey?
169.
Oh, 169. Robert, do you want to fill us in with regards to that late information?
Yes, I'm happy to do so, Chair. Just before the meeting, the applicant had asked that information. He felt it was very important that was included as part of your consideration, but he never really provided anything compelling to say why it should be taken into account. The extra information, you're looking at 2 elevational drawings showing the southeast elevation with different proposals to the ones you see in page 169. Page 169 is the proposed development. What these 2 pictures show is, if you like, what you could do using permitted development rights. So what you could actually put on that elevation by way of dormers without needing planning permission. The other, I think there are another 19 pages which are supporting documents and letters of support from neighbours and third parties in the vicinity. If it helps, Chair, if you want to look at that information and consider it, it has been included in the presentation, but at the end, so that you would have the option, and if you wanted to call on that information and take it into account, we could present it to you at the meeting today. It would be up to Claire to advise, but you would maybe want to take a small recess and take time to have a look at the representations if you decided on that course of action. But the information is there today in the presentation if you want to take it into account.
So colleagues, I suppose the position we're in at the present moment is, do we want to see that new information, or are we going to stand by what we have in front of us and just tell the applicant that we should have had that information before this meeting? In fact, it should have been in before the planning committee meeting, I would have thought. Ivor.
Chair, does it require to be in before the planning committee, or does it require to be here for the LRB? I'm thinking back to an awkward day and a bit I spent at a planning inquiry at St John's Town of Dalry, and there was new information. Actually, the application that came before the planning committee was changed, and new information was put in preparation for the inquiry, which changed the whole argument. So should that have been prior to the LRB actually receiving it? You know, can you change? No, it wasn't a material change, but it was a change which affected the decision.
Yeah. Well, I think we need, Claire, can you give us some kind of legal advice on whether we should admit this information or not? I would take the view that it should have been available to the original planning application and not come in at the last minute.
Yeah, as I outlined, as Robert's outlined as well, there should be good reason given why it wasn't in front of the appointed officer when the decision was first made. So it's up to you as an LRB whether you think sufficient reason has been given to take that into account today.
I'll let Gail in, then we'll ask Robert for that reasoning, if you don't mind. Gail.
It's kind of on the same point as Ivor. It might be useful to see that information, but I don't know what it would do today to move us either way. I mean, clearly, if there is a compromise somewhere, is this the place to find that compromise? And I suppose it's just to take some governance on that from the planning officer's perspective.
Yeah. Robert, what advice would you give? Or do you want to give advice, or do you prefer not to?
I'm quite happy to advise, Chair. I've obviously seen the information. It doesn't change the proposal that's in front of you. You've got the elevation, as Councillor Lever pointed out, on page 169. That is the proposal under consideration at the moment. The extra information does not seek to change that in any way. What it does effectively is you have two drawings that the architect produced, and he's basically saying this is what you could do at this property without needing planning permission. And the drawings are, if you like, being introduced as a comparison to try and demonstrate that in light of what you can do without planning permission, what actually is under consideration here isn't comparatively worse, if you like, or isn't comparatively significantly worse. So you should, use that to weigh in your decision to grant planning permission. The other letters are obviously just to try and indicate the level of support he's managed to achieve from third parties, so that they're pre-prepared and signed letters of support from people in the vicinity. My view is if you decide to take them into account, I don't think it would change what's in front of you, to be honest. It would allow you to take that, to take those issues into account and give them some weight. If you didn't take them into account and the decision was upheld, for example, then there would be nothing to stop the applicant making a further planning application and including those documents, so that then the case officer could take them into account when she made another decision. So I think you would be, my view is you would be safe taking them into account. I don't think they're really going to change anything. At the same time, I've not really been given a compelling reason as to why that information wasn't in front of the case officer when the decision was made originally.
Yeah. Ivor.
Curiosity. The supporting statement that's in it, page 113. When did that come in? Was it prior to the it being determined by the being assessed under the LRB rules? Because in there it quite clearly states there's two drawings showing what could be done under permitted development.
Chair, just for clarification, on page 113, you've got the supporting statement that accompanied the notice of review. So that was submitted after the appointed officer made their decision. So it's the supplementary part to the notice of review form.
Okay, colleagues, do you want that information, or do you just want to carry on with what we've got in front of us? Gail?
Sorry, Chair. I would be minded to look at the information simply on the basis that if we have additional information, we should probably just at least look at it, but accepting that it doesn't affect what's in front of us today. But I think it's incumbent on us just to have a look at that information, personally.
Okay. Is Anybody otherwise minded? No. Okay, can you put it up on the screen at all, Lara?
Thanks, Jim. Quite happy to cover these. This is the first drawing which shows elevations and sections as proposed, and it's described as if formed under permitted development. So this is option one. So like I say, this is the agent trying to demonstrate what you could do without needing planning permission. And the key issue is obviously in relation to the top drawing, the southeast elevation, because that's where the contentious dormer is located. If you move on to the next slide, this is the next piece of information being introduced. You see a different approach to the same southeast roof plane there with a different dormer elevation. And again, the applicant's agent is saying you can do this without needing planning permission. So comparatively, there isn't a significant difference here. It's that kind of argument. The next document covers many pages. If we move to the next slide, you have supporting statements, and you have, I think there's either 17 or 19 of them. I can't remember how many off the top of my head, but you have quite a number of statements like these. So I don't know if you want to have a look through all of these and take time to do it, or even have a quick break or recess to allow yourselves to do that. But they're very much of this nature. As you go through them, they're very similar, and obviously they've been redacted to protect the identity of the third parties.
Mm-hmm. Right, do you want to take a break and go through these letters, or do you just want Lara to bring them up one at a time? Jeffrey?
Thanks, Chair. I think what we asked to do is to review review the decision which has been made. So I don't think there's any point in going through all this additional information.
Okay. Everybody in agreement with that? We'll just get back to the papers and go through them. Everybody happy? Okay. You want to take your hand down, Jeffrey? Where was it? It was in section 1, notice of review, pages 105 to 125. Section 2, report on handling, determined under delegated powers and related correspondence, pages 127 to 140. Section 3, observations of the appointed officer, pages 141 to 144. Section 4, comments of the applicant's agent, pages 145 to 147. Section 5, planning application form submitted 28th August 2020 and 1st of September 2020, associated plans and supporting information, pages 149 to 169. And decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council, pages 171 to 178. Decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated 5th October 2020. Section 7, relevant extracts from the Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, pages 179 to 185. Section 8, photos of the application site. I think we've seen better photographs on the screen. Okay, anybody any comments to make? Do you consider it sufficient information to make a decision? Robert, I think everybody's went home.
I do.
Jeffrey,
Yes, I think we do.
you've got sufficient information. That's fine, thank you. Is everybody else in agreement with that? And if you want to raise any specific issues, please do so. Right, can we agree the decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council to refuse this application as detailed? Ivor?
What options do we have as a LRB today? Can we approve it in part? Because the application is for 3 box dormers in the northwest and 1 in the southeast. Now, the northwest I don't have any problem with, but the whole application has been refused because of the reverse one. Can we partially agree this for the bits that are acceptable and say the condition is that you don't implement the southeast one? To be honest, I prefer one of the proposals and the other, the supplementary things. I think they do fit in better rather than the large ones. So can we do that?
Robert?
Thanks, Chair. It's a very good question. I mean, I'm aware that members are constantly told you can't part approve, part refuse. I remember many years ago dealing with a wind farm for 13 turbines, 2 of which were problematic, and members imposed a condition with our blessing to remove 2 of them. The difficulty here is, I think, if you grant it permission subject to a condition refusing permission for the southeast dormer, I think that is such a key element of the proposal that condition would be tantamount to a refusal of the application. And that's just my view. I think it's too big an element to put a condition on removing it. It's not a minor part, it's quite a major part of it. My recommendation to members, if they were so minded, would be to refuse the application in its totality, and then it would be open to the applicant to come forward with something different in respect of the approach to the southeast elevation. Like I said, they would be able to make another planning application after this decision.
Councillor Lever?
Yeah, I would agree with Robert on this. I think we need to look at it as a whole rather than in separate parts.
I certainly could come back with a, I suppose they could ask for advice from the planners, and that could be part of the advice. Ivor, how does that sound?
Chair, I'm quite happy with that. It's just if it would allow the gentleman to get on with some work to put the northwest ones in. My concern is if we don't allow, or I think we should suggest to him that we would accept that. I don't know, is it a case that would never be turned down the northwest, so that he knows that if he puts that in with an amended proposal for the southeast, that he's in with, as long as it meets criteria, etc., that he would be in with a good chance, because you wouldn't like to hold them back if there is a fundamental argument that the northwest one tied with the southeast should never happen. That's my sort of worry. If it's a case of when it comes back with a proposal that suits, then fire on.
Well, that's really what I was saying, I think, Ivor, that we refuse the application at the present moment, but when we send that note to the applicant, we could ask them to contact the planners, and they could go through what would be acceptable. Rather than us getting, if we could get ourselves into a knot if we start to try and give them certain parts of this application and take other parts away. How does that sound to you, Robert?
I think that sounds fair, Chair. When I look at the reason for the decision to refuse planning permission, it's quite clear that it relates to the massing, scale and design of the box dormer to the rear southeast elevation. There's no reference to the northwest dormers windows that are proposed, and it's clear from looking at the report that the problematic element is the southeast elevation. I think the applicant's agent understands that, because the information you've just seen that's been introduced focuses on the dormer approach to the southeast elevation. So I think they're quite clear that there's no problem with those that are on the northwest elevation. It's just the issue with the southeast elevation dormer window that remains to be resolved. So I think if you upheld the decision, I think that would come across quite clearly and it would be understood. And I'm sure there would be some resolution to that in due course.
Ivor, is that the response you want?
Yeah, that gives me confidence that as long as the applicant understands that there is a requirement to amend the southeast elevation, then I'm quite happy with that.
Is anybody otherwise minded? Thank you, Gail. Everybody else quite happy with that? That we refuse this application, but the planners can discuss with the applicant future development.
Yes, I'm happy with that approach.
Okay. Anybody otherwise minded? No. Okay. We'll agree we refuse this planning permission for the formation of 3 box dormer windows northwest elevation and 1 box dormer southeast elevation of the dwelling house at Springbank, Cotton Street, Carl Douglas. Application 20/1446/FUL. Thank you very much, folks. Can we now move to item 6? Notice of review, refusal of planning permission for installation of 4 replacement windows with UPVC and 1 replacement door in front elevation of dwelling house, retrospective, at 1 Main Street, New Abbey. Planning reference 20/1001/FUL. All right. Notice of review, pages 191 to 194. Notice of review dated 19th October 2020, submitted by Technical Architectural Services Agents on behalf of James. I think that should be Kingan, no Klingan, and Sons applicant, received the same day. Pages 195 to 201. Ivor.
Chair, I note that the applicant has said that he doesn't, or the agent and applicant, that they don't think that it can be dealt with without a site visit. Now, are we obliged to grant that site visit? And under the current circumstances, we had Mr. Sutty yesterday telling us that it could be a while before we actually achieve a site visit because of the COVID situation. Just could you clarify that point, please?
Based on that, could you take us through the photographs, Robert? If you didn't mind, Ivor, if we go through the photographs and see what we're talking about and see after that if you want a site visit, would that be acceptable to you?
Chair, I'm happy to deal with the photos, but the applicant has asked for a site visit, and have we to take that into account? That's my sort of question. Have we to take his consideration into account, or is it up to us to decide?
I suppose that my view, Ivor, would be that we can decide if we've got sufficient information on the site of the building and on the area around about it, and decide then if we need a site visit based on the information we've got in front of us. Not just because the applicant wants us to go there. Yeah, you come back, Ivor?
Chair, that's fine. It's just if there was a sort of flaw in our process if we didn't take into account. That would worry me. It's more the legal standing of whether we need to take this into account or whether we can decide out with that if there's sufficient evidence in front of us.
Okay, Robert, do you want to address that, or will I ask Claire?
Well, I'm quite happy to. Claire might want to also comment on that too. My take on this is when you're reviewing a case like this, a notice of review case that's been submitted, you must take all of the relevant information into account. So the request for the site visit is a relevant consideration, and you should take that into account when you're considering the case today. Now, obviously, you are doing that just now. I don't think you're obliged to undertake a site visit just because someone has asked you to do it, but you should consider the request as part of the overall notice of review. As far as the logistics of site visits at the moment, I'm really not sure, but as with anything else, if you don't feel you've got enough information in front of you today and you wanted to undertake a site visit, for example, we would then stop the clock, if you like, at this meeting, and then you would issue a procedure notice to all relevant parties advising of what the next process would be, which would be a site visit in this case. Like I say, the mechanics of that I'm not too sure about at the moment, so maybe Claire would give you advice, but you're not obliged to acquiesce to a request for a site visit just because it's been asked for, but you should be seen to be taking it into account as part of your consideration. Yeah.
Based on that, then, do you want to see the photographs before we go any further? Ivor, that's it.
Chair, I'm happy to proceed. It was just whether, it was the way it's written, can this review continue to a conclusion? And the applicant has said no. I just wondered if it we had to consider or whether that was something that we had to do. So I think Robert's highlighted, as long as we consider that option, whether we're required to do it or not, it's up to ourselves.
Well, rather than waste time going through the papers, could we see the photographs first and we could maybe make a decision based on that? That sound okay? Everybody quite happy with that?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Chair.
Gail's happy, Jeff's happy, Ivor's happy. Okay, everybody else will take, Lara, could you take us through the photographs, please?
Thank you, Chair. These pictures which are going to be shown come from the case officer, and they appear at pages 287 to 290 of your papers. It's probably also worth mentioning at this point in time, you've probably noticed that the applicant has submitted pictures too, and they appear on pages 263 to 268 of the papers. Again, it's showing other properties and windows and doors and things within New Abbey. The first slide that you can see here, this is the front elevation, obviously, of number 1 Main Street, New Abbey. So you can see the windows that have been installed. Moving to the next slide, it's a similar view of the same property, just slightly more oblique and round the road a wee bit. It shows the adjacent property as well. Next slide is showing number 13 Main Street. Which is the next case, but it shows you the type of windows that there are there and the types of doors too, just as a comparison. The next slide is again of number 13 Main Street, looking to the right hand side, so panning right from the previous photograph, and it's showing the type of windows that have been installed there too. The next picture is slightly out of focus, it's similar to the 2 before, and the final picture in the presentation is showing number 13 and number 15, which is the adjacent property at New Abbey.
Right, I don't know about everybody else, but my view is these houses are on the main street. It's not something that's hidden from everyday traffic, if you like. And it's based on the windows that you can see quite easily. And all the properties, and I wouldn't have thought a site visit was going to make any difference to that, other than maybe go to the Abbey Arms or the Crifflin and get some tea if you're lucky. But anybody otherwise minded, that my suggestion would be that we go ahead and make a decision based on what we've got in front of us. Anybody otherwise minded? Ivor?
Yeah. Mr. Duncan able to tell us what kind of windows they are in number 15, I think it was he said? And I'm not sure which house that is. Is that the last white doored house? Or is that still 13? And the Lansard, is it Lansard or Mansard? I can never, roof next door. There's a windows there. Are they plastic or are they wooden? And what kind of windows are those?
Thanks, Jim. I'm quite happy to answer. My understanding is that number 13 is the property you can see in the last picture there. When it says 13 and 15 Main Street, I think number 13 is the one on the right-hand side with the blue sill, and the dark door belongs to that property. I understand that number 15 is the one on the left-hand side with the white door, but I have to admit I haven't been out to this application site. In terms of the types of windows, I think probably your best reference are the pictures that appear on pages 263 to 268 of the submission, because I haven't been out in site, but those are pointing out the various window types and where they feel, for example, there are UPVC windows. So I think I would really need to, unless you wanted to carry out a site visit, I think you would really need to rely on the pictures you see there to guide you in terms of types. You can see various properties, number 1 Main Street, number 10 Main Street, number 16 Main Street highlighted there, where they feel that windows have been changed from their originals. So I can't tell you, for example, what the exact window type is on that opening on the mansard roof, unfortunately.
Could Laura, I stop there, Laura, please, would you? If you look at page 267, number 16 Main Street, that'll be the opposite side of the road, though, won't it? So even numbers one side and odd numbers the other. Could you go back one, Laura, please? Another one, please. No, sorry. Take it the other way, please. I stop there. That's the one, I think. That on the assumption that number 1's back at the square, the furthest away one will be 13 and the dark door will be number 15, because what is following that row is the hall, the New Abbey Hall, and it sits back a wee bit from the houses. So that's 13 is the far away one, 15 is the dark door. Based on the pictures, and I can pick it out from page 267. Okay, do you want to go through the papers? Everybody quite comfortable? Right, for refusal of permission for installation of 4 replacement windows with UPVC and 1 replacement door on front elevation of dwelling house, retrospective, number 1 Main Street, New Abbey, planning a reference 20/1001 FUL. Item 6, page 191 to 194. Section 2, report on handling, determined under delegated powers and related correspondence, pages 203 to 241. If anybody wants in, just give us a shout. Observations of the appointed officer on the applicant's agent's notice of review and further comments from third party. pages 243 to 247. Planning application form submitted on the 3rd of July 2020, associated plans and supporting information, pages 249 to 268. Decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated 7th August 2020, pages 269 to 276. Section 6, relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway Local Development Plan 2, pages 277 to 283. And finally, the photographs, pages 285 to 290. Right, anybody, any issues they want to raise? Gail?
Thank you, Chair. Just absolute clarity that this is not a listed building in any sense. It simply sits within the conservation area. And I suppose what would we be proposing to the applicant as the replacement? What would we deem as being of the right character for the building and the area? Was there any discussion around that initially? Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Gail. Robert?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to confirm that 1 Main Street is not a listed building. It is in the conservation area. In terms of an appropriate alternative, we would look for a sash and case style timber window to replicate the character and appearance of those within the conservation area. At the moment, good examples of traditional windows. And the thing you're always trying to do with buildings like this is try and understand the original style of the windows and replicate them as closely as you possibly can. But you can obviously get windows now that are in sympathetic materials and of a sympathetic style and detailing that can achieve good modern standards of insulation and so on. And we've seen some of those elsewhere. So that would be the kind of thing we would be looking for.
Okay, anybody any other questions for Robert or comments to make on the papers? Are you comfortable that you've had enough information to make a decision on this item? A decision that we refused planning permission for installation of 4 replacement windows with UPVC and 1 replacement door in front elevation of dwelling house, which has all been done respective at 1 Main Street, New Abbey. So we agreed to refuse the application. Anybody otherwise minded? Gail?
I'm probably not going to get support with this, but I am slightly otherwise minded, having had a look at the replacement windows on a couple of other properties in the area, and accepting that we do have local development policies in conservation areas, but we also need to live in the 21st affordable century. So I would be minded to not refuse and just leave as is, but that's just my personal view again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor. Come on, I've forgotten your name.
Justy.
Mr. Justy, yes. Sorry.
Italian in the council.
Sorry about that.
So I agree with Councillor McGregor in the sense that it's 21st century. I at the minute live in a building with old wooden sash and case, single glazing. It's not efficient. And when you consider the council's other policies such as the climate emergency declaration, I think that we need to go in the face of the bigger issue that's facing us right now. And I completely agree with Councillor McGregor that we should perhaps overturn this decision and allow these windows to go through.
The other thing I would say to that is there are alternatives available. You can still have the same window frame, but there are alternatives to seal them better than they are. And as it says in the papers, a lot of the changes down the street have been done before the law was changed. to try to ensure that people kept the same windows in their buildings. Andrew, you want back in?
If I could just come back on that, just in respect, Chair, I've looked at changing my windows to alternative sash case with sensitive materials, and cost is an absolute serious issue. So I can understand that in these times where people have been furloughed, there's been less money going around, etc. That basic maintenance on properties is difficult. It's difficult at these times, and I have a lot of sympathy with that. And the cost is a real detriment.
I don't know if there's funding available for these sorts of things or not, but the difficulty I've got is that, as it says in the paper, some houses have changed, but that was before the legislation changed to what it is now, where any replacement must be like for like, and that's a difficulty we've got, and it's whether we uphold that or not. Anybody else want to comment?
Chair?
Yes, Jeffrey?
Hand up. My concern is I've got sympathy with the applicant and with what Gail and Andrew are saying, but my concern would be, are we setting a precedent that if we decide we aren't actually going to be obeying the current regulations, then any subsequent applicant can just say, well, I'm not going to obey those either. So can we have some indication, Robert? Would that be a case?
My problem there would be, Jeffrey, they wouldn't bother making an application. Hey, Robert, you respond, please.
Thank you, Chair. You're looking at a case that's obviously been determined under the relevant appointed officer under delegated powers. So it's not been a committee decision. You have a reason for the refusal, which is in the decision notice, and it's considered to be contrary to the Council's local development plan 2 policies, H8 and HE2 conservation areas, and also the supplementary guidance. So it's been assessed as a departure from policy and refused on that basis. If members of the local review body wish to depart from that decision, are they taking this to be a departure from the terms of the development plan, and are there reasons for that? In terms of setting a precedent, it's more a case of looking at each case on its own merits. But if you do think this is a departure from the development plan, you would need to try and provide reasoning for your decision in any subsequent notice that would be forthcoming. And it's more a concern about how you interpret the policy in this case than a particular precedent as a one-off, because, like I say, each case falls to be determined on its own merits.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I understand that, but as you say, in future, would any applicant actually look towards getting planning permission before they went ahead and install whatever window they wanted?
That's the downside as well. Well, it's already happened in this case, where they haven't bothered with planning application and gone ahead and put the windows in. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate everything that's being said. I truly do, and I don't like to divert away from policy, but it's very clear at 8A1 that the detailing and design of the replacement windows in front elevation are unsympathetic to the character of the building. I would say that's a very subjective view, and I have to say that given there is precedent already in the village of more modern, whether you like the modern or not, we are in a place where ensuring that buildings are wind and watertight and more efficient for tenants, which is another issue altogether. I just feel that it's quite heavy-handed to ask the applicant to remove windows and go to huge expense to put them in. I don't think it sets a precedent, because we only have this case in front of us today. And obviously our planning officers would deal with each individual case as they came along. But I just think that we need to keep it in perspective. Thank you.
Well, as it happens, we've got another one coming up following this.
What I meant was we don't have hundreds in front of us today.
We scared me. Anybody else want to comment? I feel that we've got ourselves into a difficult situation. There are people who have made changes, but that was prior to law being changed, planning law being changed into if a windows need changed, he'd do it like for like. Where prior to that, people were just doing away with the wooden windows and putting plastics in. And I realise that creates a problem. And I'm not sure if they had to be replaced, people that's done it already prior to the change in law, if they had wanted to replace their windows, they may have to go back to the original for that house. Is that the situation, Robert?
Effectively, Chair, when the case officer gets an application, they're determining it against the relevant policies at that point in time. And this is slightly different. This is legislation bringing things within the remit of a planning application, where previously that wasn't the case. So yes, you do have a certain amount of unsympathetic replacement windows within the conservation area, and all of them are like that within Dumfries and Galloway. So you've got that kind of legacy. But if you're then getting a further application, now it's, if you like, subject to a planning application, you have to assess that planning application against the policies within the development plan, which change through time, obviously, and that's a decision for the elected members of this council. What our objective then is to try and make sure we're implementing that policy, unless we feel there's a case to depart from it, in which case we'd refer that to the elected members. In looking at this case, you need to decide whether or not this accords with your own policy or not. And as Councillor McGregor said, that's a judgment call. If you feel it does depart from your policy, then there may be reasons that you have to justify that departure, and those need to form part of the decision. Alternatively, you could take the view that, well, actually, you don't think the policy is breached here because you think they're sympathetic to the character of the building and it would preserve or enhance the character. Is that kind of judgment call that needs to be made? But in terms of future applications, we would need to determine those against the same policies and make those same kind of judgment calls.
Thanks for what? Councillor Lever?
So the applicant decided to replace them with UVPC sash windows. He would still need to get planning permission prior to doing that.
Because it's a change in material. Robert, sorry.
Yes, that's correct.
Anybody else want to comment?
So just to come back on that, so he was in breach of planning anyway by not having the planning application approved, irrespective of what he replaced them with.
I would say that's right. Is that correct, Robert?
Yes, that's correct.
You should have got planning application should have been in before he'd done anything.
It needs planning permission. I don't know the circumstances in terms of the background of the case, the lead up to it, but yes, it was a retrospective application.
Councillor Lever, you want back in?
I think that clarifies. We've got two aspects here. One is that the development went ahead without planning permission, and the second is that it's being deemed inappropriate, the windows which are being installed. So there are two aspects to it.
Yeah, that's quite contrary to the planning conditions. Anybody else want to comment? Are we now going to a vote? Or are we in agreement that we refuse this planning permission? Jeffrey, you want back in? Oh, Ivor, sorry. Ivor, and then Gail.
Chair, could I have clarification from, I think it was Gail that moved that we approve them. Is that on the grounds that we're departing from policy because of the new council policy on the climate emergency? Is that her proposal?
Gail?
Sorry, my mute button wasn't working there. I think it's on a number of factors. I mean, Andrew mentioned environmental and insulation sort of issues as well. And I certainly think that, in my view, it isn't particularly unsympathetic to the character of the building, and I don't believe that it fails to preserve or enhance the character. So on that basis, I don't accept the grounds for refusal personally, but I do think that we need to look at things like our climate emergency policy, which is looking at making properties much more efficient than they are, particularly for tenants who don't own property, pay rent and are often on lower incomes as well. So on that basis, I would not refuse I would approve it as is, as an exception.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to get involved. Councillor Lever.
I mean, can we approve as a one-off, or given that there are two cases, a two-off exception, or are we just opening the gates to anybody just to impose or apply whatever is the cheapest windows to their properties?
I suppose the situation we're in at the present moment with this application, we've got another application to consider after this, which is on the same lines, just further down the road. So if we agree this one, we're putting ourselves in a difficult position to refuse the next one.
I think if we agree this one, then we have to agree the next one.
That's the situation as I would see it. But certainly, as a situation is at the present moment, I would move that we refuse this planning permission. You want back in, Jeffrey?
Andrew's wanting in.
Andrew? Sorry, I didn't see you.
No, if Councillor Lever wants to continue and finish his point or second you, I'll give way until then.
Right, anybody want to second me? We refuse this planning permission. Councillor Lever.
I think we are very much in a cluster. You know, this person's obviously invested an awful lot of money into the double glazing. But what my concern is that we don't actually set a precedent. That we need to make it plain to anyone that they need to get planning permission in the first place, and then they need to replace the windows with the appropriate window. And how do we do
that? The applicant isn't the resident in the house, because he doesn't stay there. I think he stays up the farm at Edge in Yabbie, or he stays up beside the sawmill. But we didn't want to bring people's financial position into this. I don't think that's a consideration that we should be putting forward. It's whether what's applied for meets the appropriate regulations. Councillor Giusti.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to second Councillor McGregor, but just a small point on precedent. And I've asked about precedent before in previous plan committees, and the answer that I've always had is that every single application must be looked at on its own merits, and I don't think it's, in fairness to you, Chair, I don't think it's particularly relevant mentioning the upcoming application, just from what I've been told before by officers in previous questions about precedent.
Yes, I don't doubt each case is taken on its merits. Councillor Lever.
Could we have some guidance from either planning or governance in this?
Robert Duncan, please.
I'm quite happy to provide guidance, Chair. In each case, regardless of whether it's elected members or appointed officers that make decisions, they must be made in accordance with the development plan, unless other material considerations indicate you should make an alternative decision to that. So in that case, your first thing to look at are the terms of the development plan, and I'm quite satisfied that's been done here. You then have to decide, is this in accordance with the development plan or not? And as Councillor McGregor's pointed out, that's a judgment call for any party that makes a decision of that nature. for me, the key thing is really having the reasoning behind the decision. Precedent doesn't bind you. If you've got a similar decision elsewhere, it makes it difficult, and you'll get the typical question, how did that get planning permission? So in a case like that, it's important that the basis of the decision is understood. What was the reasoning for the decision in that particular case that made it different from another one that was refused? So really, in terms of precedent, it's more trying, for me, it's more trying to set out what was it about that case that made it different to another one? You know, what were the reasons behind the decision? And as long as that's clear, precedent's easier to deal with. It's more where it's unclear why a particular decision was arrived at. And that's where we tend to find more things. And you get the typical question, how did that get planning permission then? You know, they'll always maybe point to a low common denominator or a bad example that maybe suits them. So, but it doesn't bind you. I mean, each case does fall to be considered on its own merits.
Well, Andrew, do you want back in?
Sorry, Chair, my hand was up from previous time.
Okay, so no bother. Anybody else want to comment? Ivor, you want to comment again?
Chair, looking at both cases, because they're sort of linked, similar thing, I think you could take different solutions on them if you wish to, because of the fact of the size and scaling of the window compared to the actual size of the window frames. You know, so there are different cases, there are different options available. So, you know, if you're concerned about taking a decision on this one, you know, I think from what I've heard, there's a feeling from one side that it meets the sort of design requirements, and the other side says, no, it doesn't. My big concern is the fact that we're here at a retrospective case, and that's where I would have more concern about setting a possibility of precedent. But I think that's what I'm saying. I think that's the kind of issue I have. I would like a sort of firm letter going out, whichever way this goes, that, you know, to whether it's agents or whatever, that retrospective isn't good enough. And we expect to have planning, if it's required, in before you do any works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And well, let's say it's the same guy. He's got two retrospective applications in, and I think we've in previous cases we have told them in no uncertain terms that the retrospective is not acceptable. Councillor McGregor.
Yeah, just very briefly on that point, and I have no issue with a stern letter going out to the applicant. I think the difficulty for me is that the regulations have clearly changed. So there are other properties within a very immediate vicinity that do have modern windows or UPVC windows. I suspect that the applicant would have had no idea that he was required to apply for planning permission for windows when there was already precedent in the village. And I think your average member of the public, unless they own a listed building or something that they're very aware would require an application, would say, well, these guys down the road did it, so I'm just going to get on with it and make life better for my tenant. So I think that's probably another area that we shouldn't crucify the applicant too much, because they probably didn't realise, because there was already precedent. And I don't think your average member of the public knows when regulations change. I often don't know.
Well, with due respect, I would say the applicant is not an ordinary member of the public. He's a businessman, and he'll be using people in this business to make applications, that sort of thing. But I didn't want to get into that argument, Gail. It's not right. Hey, Councillor Lever.
Yeah, it could be argued that had he gone through the proper procedure and applied for planning permission in the first place, then he would have worked with the planners who'd advised him that what he was proposing wasn't acceptable for a conservation area. So basically, he's brought this on himself to a certain extent.
Yeah, and I think I think Robert might agree with me that we have in the past, there are UPVC windows that are not the great thick frames, but are closer to a copy of the wooden frames that he's replaced. And they, unfortunately, they haven't been used in this instance. Councillor Justy, you went back in there.
Thanks, Chair. It's just to add a wee bit of personal kind of evidence to what's been discussed here. My mother's a businesswoman, and she owns this flat that I'm in with sash case windows, and she had the scaffolding up and ready to put PVC windows in, and I told her that she couldn't because it's a conservation area, but she didn't know that. She didn't realise. I don't think we can judge people's knowledge of the local planning regulations just based on what they do for a living.
I don't disagree with you, Andrew. We're not here to judge people. We're here to judge the application that they've put in, and it's retrospective. Councillor Lever.
You'll recall, Chair, there was an application for, or a retrospective application for planning permission to install a UPVC door in Lovers Walk some time ago, and the neighbours objected to that. And turned down, and we received confirmation fairly shortly afterwards that it had been replaced by a wooden door in the style of the original door. So I do think we need, if we are going to set regulations, I do think we need to stick with them.
That's the difficulty we've got. The regulations as they are now, this is an application that should be refused. So, can we go to, oh, you went back in, Jeff, or you just left your hand up?
Sorry, on that basis, I'm quite happy to, I'm not happy, but I'm prepared to second your proposal.
Thank you. Gail?
My position stands, Councillor McKee, thank you.
Okay. Ivor?
Are we going to the vote?
That's what I'm kind of working on at the present moment. Jeffrey's just seconded me, and Gail stood by what she said.
Is Councillor Justy seconding Gail?
I believe that I already had. Sorry to interrupt.
Aye, yes.
Chair, would you like me to go to the vote?
Okay, Claire, I'll leave it in your capable hands. Because mine are burning.
Right, we have a motion proposed by Councillor McGregor, seconded by Councillor Justy, which would be to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and approve the application as an exception to policy, given the reasons being there are examples elsewhere in the conservation area, noting that the appearance is subjective, and also recognising the environmental impact and supporting the Council's climate change emergency. Before we go any further, is there anything else? Is that a fair reflection, or is there anything else you'd like added to that?
No, that's absolutely great, Claire, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we have an amendment proposed by yourself, Chair, seconded by Councillor Lever, to uphold the decision of the appointed officer and refuse for the same reasons as outlined in the report. So, going to the vote then, Chair.
Amendment.
Councillor Justy.
Motion.
Councillor Hislop.
Motion.
Councillor Lever.
Amendment.
Councillor McGregor.
Motion.
Okay. Motion's carried 3 votes to 2. That's the decision reversed and the approval given. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We now move to agenda item 7. Refusal of planning permission for installation of 4 replacement windows with UPVC on front elevation of dwelling house. Retrospective at 13 Main Street, New Abbey. Planning reference 20/1003/4. Okay. Section 1, notice of review dated 19th October 2020, submitted by Technical Architectural Services Agent on behalf of James Kingan and Sons applicant and received on the same day. Pages 295 to 301. Section 2, report on handling, determined under delegated powers and related correspondence, pages 303 to 336. Anybody, any questions or comments? Section 3, observation of the appointed officer and the applicant's agent's notice of review and further comments from a third party, pages 339 to 343. Planning application forms submitted on the 3rd of July 2020, associated plans and supporting information, pages 345 to 364. Decision letter from Dumfries and Galloway Council dated 7th August 2020, pages 365 to 372. Section 6, relevant extracts from Dumfries and Galloway local plan, pages 373 to 380. And photos of application site, pages 381 to 386. Anybody, any comments to make? No? Anybody, any issues want to raise? No? You just want to go straight? Robert Duncan.
Chair, just to let you know, the pictures are the same as for the last item. I don't know if the members want to see them again or not, but they are the same set of pictures, and the supporting pictures submitted by the applicant in the papers are the same as well.
Thanks, Robert. Do you want to see the pictures again? No? Okay. Do you want to go straight to making a decision? I move. Oh, Councillor McGregor.
I was going to let you speak first. It's not like me. Yeah.
I'll give it a second chance, will you?
Sorry?
I'll give it a try.
Go on then.
I move that we refuse the planning permission for installation of 4 replacement windows with UPZ on the front elevation of dwelling house retrospective at 13 Main Street, New Abbey. Application number 20/1003/FUL. I move that we refuse. Come on, Gail, I thought you were going to second me.
I'm afraid that I'm going to have to be utterly consistent on this one and apply the same principles as the previous application and the same reasons. And I think even more so for this cottage. Having sat on Google Maps for the last half an hour running through New Abbey, the property directly opposite has got exactly the same windows, and I think we have to apply the same principle that I did for the last case and approve the application as an exception to policy. Thank you.
Councillor Lever.
I think that just confirms what I was saying about precedent being set. Can I refer to page 321 in the report, which is the submission from the chair of the New Abbey Community Council, where in the section in italics, 2/3 of the way down the post, it says the usual planning controls also apply in conservation areas. The plan permissions also need for other changes, including making changes to the exterior houses such as windows and doors, stone cleaning, rendering, painting and cladding. So, you know, the regulations are there and they're understood. So I think in terms of being consistent and sticking with the regulations, I would move that we refuse it on that basis. Otherwise, you know, where do we actually draw the line in this?
That's an unfortunate thing. Councillor Giusti.
Just a second, Councillor McGregor, please, Chair.
Oh, right. I didn't pick up what you said there, Andrew, properly. That's fine.
Sorry. Just a second, Councillor McGregor, please, Chair.
Okay. Okay, we're going back to, have I got a seconder? Councillor Lever second me there, did he?
Mhm.
I did.
You're glutton for punishment, Jeffrey. Okay, you just, hey, Councillor McGregor?
Yeah, just very, very briefly, it's unfortunate we've got two applications back to back from the same applicant. I think it's probably fair to say that if I was in a situation where I didn't feel it was appropriate, as you know, being very firm but fair, I would come to an entirely different conclusion. So I've no issue with the precedent on this or the last one, because it will not sway how I would determine something in the future.
Councillor Lever, you want back in?
Just to say, Chair, it's got nothing to do with this planning application, but I think if I'd been told to reverse, for example, a installation of a UPVC door, and I'd then gone along with that, I'd be feeling very aggrieved at the decision such have been made.
Well, that could be other residents, say, within New Abbey. That could be the situation, and obviously in other villages and conservation areas. We are where we are.
Agreed, Chair, and I don't know why we have regulations in that case if we just choose to ignore them.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, very unfortunate position. Anybody else want to comment? Okay, Claire, you want to take the vote, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Got a motion proposed by yourself, seconded by Councillor Lever, to uphold the decision of the appointed officer and refuse the application for the grounds stated in the report. Amendment proposed by Councillor McGregor, seconded by Councillor Giusti, to reverse the decision of the appointed officer and approve the application as an exception to policy, given the examples elsewhere in the conservation area, again noting that appearance is subjective and that it supports the environmental impact, supporting the climate change emergency. Okay, so going to the vote then, Chair.
Motion.
Councillor Giusti.
Amendment.
Councillor Hislop.
Amendment.
Councillor Lever.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor.
Amendment.
Amendments carried 3 votes to 2. That's the decision reversed and the permission granted. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, folks. I have no other business deemed urgent, so I will wave you all farewell. Thank you very much for your assistance.